The Jurassic Park / Jurassic World franchise has long been one of my favourites. When I was a kid, I, like many boys I'm sure, thought dinosaurs were the coolest thing ever. Thus, Jurassic Park and its sequels were right up my alley. The first film's clearly the greatest of the bunch, and I think the sequels are far less popular, but I love them all. They hold a very special and nostalgic place in my heart, and of course, for the most part, they did well financially. Oh, maybe not Jurassic Park 3 in comparison to pretty much every other installment, but yeah, the others did very well for themselves. Then in 2015, we saw the release of the Jurassic World saga, and once again, they all did tremendously well. Not a single one of these films dipped below $1 billion. Jurassic World grossed $1.6 billion in 2015, Fallen Kingdom grossed $1.3 billion in 2018, and then Dominion grossed $1 billion in 2022. So it really does make a lot of sense that they're going back to the well and making a fresh film as what seems to be currently a standalone sequel, but could easily pivot into a fresh trilogy depending on how well Rebirth does at the box office. As of right now, it does seem like it's going to be a massive hit though. It was released on the 2nd of July, and as of writing this, it's grossed $140 million, off a budget of $180 million, so yeah, good chance it's going to be a massive smash hit unless the reviews start to kill the hype after the first onslaught of viewers. To be honest though, despite a bad critical score of 51% on Rotten Tomatoes and a pretty mid audience score of 72%, I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact. People know what they're getting into when they go to see a Jurassic World film, and that is stunning visuals, a beautiful soundtrack, crazy and visual action, and a potentially middling plot. I don't think people are coming into it expecting some extremely deep themes in this day and age. We want the dinosaurs to brutally eat people, and we want it now. I ended up going to see it not long after it released, and I'm in two minds about it. On the one hand, I enjoyed myself well enough when I was watching through the film, but I think I was just taken in by the experience. The more I've sat down and thought about it, the less impressed I've been. Don't get me wrong though, as there are definitely some good elements on offer. For starters, it's a visually beautiful film. The environments are gorgeous and the cinematography is stunning, particularly when on the ship and the beach. Just wonderful. On top of that, the CGI for the dinosaurs was once again tremendous. It's crazy to see how far the franchise has come since the first movie, which, if you ask me, still holds up in a lot of ways for a film that's over 30 years old and came about just before the CGI arms race in which visual effects have gotten more and more insane. I think my only real complaint about the visual side of things is that by this point, we've seen the rainforest vibe again and again and again. It's a bit tired and it felt rather derivative in that way. It's not a knock on the quality of the movie, which of course was incredible, but yeah, it's a bit bland. That's how I'd view it. This is counterbalanced by the really varied and exciting action sequences though. They're across the board visceral and fast-paced, filled with so much tension and suspense. Honestly, it carries the story in a lot of ways. In terms of the music, hell yeah, top tier as always. Of course, the majority of my love for the score comes from that classic Jurassic Park theme which kicks in when they're in the grasslands, but who even cares? As long as that theme plays, you are guaranteed to be getting goosebumps in the theatre at least once, and that's what matters. Those are the major selling points of the film that it really excels in. Where I think it starts to fall short though is in the storyline itself and the development of its characters. I guess we'll just walk through the story so I can explain what I mean. The story begins in a special facility set before the Jurassic World incident, where scientists have been working on creating mutant dinosaurs, presumably to be an attraction. Since these facilities are apparently jokes at best, a candy wrapper is able to trigger a complete meltdown, and allows one of the most dangerous mutants to escape, forcing the scientists to evacuate and apparently allowing various other species to leave their containment zones too, turning the island into a no-go zone filled with deadly dangers. Thankfully, Candy Bar Guy got eaten for his stupidity instead of anybody else, but it does turn into one of those questions. How does this shit keep happening? Do they not have armed guards that can take these things down? Why would you not put some sort of fail-safe kill switch into the dinosaurs so you can kill it if it ever goes crazy? To be honest, you always have to suspend your disbelief in these films because there's no chance that these dinosaurs should ever be able to humiliate humans like they do every day of the week. Anyway, the story moves on to 17 years later, where dinosaurs have mostly gone extinct and now only exist at the equator due to differing oxygen levels. Not gonna lie, but that sounds scientifically dubious to me. And again, trying to expect accurate science from a Jurassic movie is a fool's errand, so it is what it is. This is where we pick up with our characters. Martin Krebs, an executive for a pharmaceutical company, recruits mercenary Zora Bennett and paleontologist Dr. Henry Loomis to assemble a team to go to the island from the prologue, where they need to take samples from 3 specific dinosaurs, which can then be used to design a drug that's going to help cure heart disease. Apparently, the executive is coming along for the ride too, which is pretty ridiculous if you ask me. If a company that I assume is very, very rich is mandating this type of mission, why would you send the only person who could be traced back to you if they are caught and arrested? Plus, why wouldn't they just send in a full special ops squad with actual weapons instead of some ragtag team? Especially if you're paying so much money in the first place. Surely you want them to succeed. I feel like this is especially crucial because the dinosaurs are proven to always be able to get the drop on humans easily, no matter what. They assemble a team led by Zora's friend Duncan and set off on their mission first to try to find an aquatic dinosaur from which they can take a sample. At the same time, a random family is crossing the Atlantic in a little boat. It's a dad, his 2 daughters, and his older daughter's stupid boyfriend who is lazy and an annoying dweeb. He does have a few hero moments here and there and is kind of cool sometimes, but for the most part his personality sucks, and no matter how much redemption they tried to cram down my throat, I spent my entire time hoping a dino would charge out of the forest and eat this dude. This family ends up getting attacked by the very dinosaur the crew are tracking, and they end up getting picked up when they hear their mayday call from their capsized boat. They're taken aboard and the crew finds the dinosaur and manages to get a sample after a very tense confrontation where they get almost capsized a couple of times. The beastie then returns, but this time with some smaller friends who are more easily able to attack the crew on the boat. Unluckily for the squad, the only dude with any sort of weapon is instantly eaten by one of the Spinosaurus, and so there's nothing they can do to protect the boat from the onslaught. Teresa, the elder daughter of the family, attempts to radio for help but is stopped by Krebs, who then refuses to save her when she's hanging off the side of the boat after an impact, leading her boyfriend Xavier to jump into the water after her alongside the rest of her family, and they don't get eaten by dinosaurs, despite there being many in the water. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew wash up on the beachhead, where the next member is eaten by a Spinosaurus because apparently she is an absolute idiot with no situational awareness whatsoever, deciding to stray away from the rest of the group, and not noticing the very obvious dinosaur standing behind her. The crew make their way to the next species of dinosaur, a giant herbivore, whilst the family are lost alone in the woods and have to contend with various deadly dangers, most notably a T-Rex that attacks them when they're trying to raft their way downriver and find the village that Zora told them about on the boat. Here they have one of the most nail-biting and intense action sequences in the movie that really showcases how they have plot armor compared to the mercenaries. The T-Rex outclasses them at every turn, and yet they survive, and he gives up, whilst the trained professionals are blitzed by the dinos one by one. I know nobody wants to see a little girl get gobbled by a T-Rex, but still, maybe don't include that side plot if it's going to be this way. The team managed to arrive at the location of the third species, a flying type this time, and the last no-namer member of the crew is horribly eaten here. My god. How much of this plot would be solved if any of them bothered to pack a gun? I know the executive guy took a pistol, and it does make sense he's saving it just in case, but you'd think he'd use it when his life was at stake, at the very least when this thing was about to attack him and Duncan after killing the random. Dr. Loomis ends up surviving a huge fall off a cliff in yet another showcase of egregious plot armor for the named characters, and eventually all the surviving characters manage to reconvene at the abandoned lab, where Zora has arranged for a helicopter to do a flyover and save them if she hadn't contacted by a certain point. Unfortunately for them though, it all goes to shit as the lights automatically come on, which attracts some mutadons to come and get them. They manage to survive, although Krebs abandons them to try to get onto an escape boat, whilst their rescue helicopter is crunched out of the air by a giant mutadon, the Distortus Rex. How does that happen? Who knows? Why do fragments of the helicopter not pierce the inside of this thing's mouth? Who knows? How is it able to swipe this thing out of the air, but is unable to catch Duncan when he's wading through the water trying to help the others escape? Who knows? But those are the deeper questions the movie clearly wants you to ignore for the rule of cool. Because if you pick at any of them, at any point in time over the course of the story, then all the drama falls apart and it becomes kind of goofy. The survivors make their way to the docks to find that lone boat, where Krebs is eaten by the Distortus Rex in rather brutal and satisfying fashion. The beast then chases the group and corners them on the docks, and so Duncan takes a flare, distracting it and leading it off into the shallows, where you presume he's going to be eaten, whilst the others can escape onto the boat. Of course, since he's a proper lead character, they don't kill him off, and he swims to safety somehow, escaping the dinosaur off-screen, and getting picked up by the boat when he alerts them with a flare. The film ends with Loomis convincing the others that instead of getting a huge payday like was the original plan, that they should instead give the samples to somebody who'd be able to make the medication without a patent, which would allow mass production of the drug, which would in turn save millions of lives across the globe. Thus the story ends, and kind of sucks to tell you the truth. It's a very bland and plotting story that is hard carried by the action sequences. There's lots of logical leaps and egregious plot armor, to the point that when the adrenaline wears off, it all falls apart. With a weak story like this, you'd hope the characters and acting would at least be good, but not really. This is the weakest performance I've ever seen from Jonathan Bailey, and to tell you the truth, it's not his fault. The script gave him nothing to work with. His character's all over the place and seems to just be the generic, morally good hunky genius. He's very much written to be the poor man's Alan Grant, with none of the nuance and interesting traits and dynamics. 2 of the mercenaries died with no development, and the one interesting guy, the gun-toting badass, he doesn't even survive to make it to the island before he dies. Waste of a character. They should have kept him alive and had him die to one of the mutadons or something. He provided an interesting counter-personality to the Doctor because he was willing to do what it takes to protect everybody, which means killing the dinosaurs in any way, including brutal neurotoxin darts. Zora and Duncan, they're just more generic nice people who are given shallow attempts at a sympathetic backstory with a dead friend and a dead son respectively, but it doesn't make them more interesting. Both are very bland overall, which is in no way good because they're the trio of lead protagonists. The family is honestly the most interesting part of the movie, and that's only because they have defined characters, relationship dynamics, personalities, and internal conflict. It's just they don't hugely fit into the vibe of the plot. To tell you the truth, the whole collectathon was a waste of time. The movie would have been far better if they had only ever intended to get the aquatic dinosaur blood, but then they're swarmed and they have to make it through the jungle to where Zora knows a team's going to come to find them. Have them face the Flyers and the T-Rex together and have them get picked off that way, one by one. Have the dude get gobbled by the pterosaur, as he does in the movie, but instead of getting eaten by a Spinosaur on the beach, kill off the woman in the river with the T-Rex. And then have the gun guy killed by Mutodons, the flying ones, before the big guy eats the chopper, and then the white collar guy. I don't know, I just feel like this would have been a far more interesting premise that would have kept the family around and allowed their influence to push Zora and Duncan into wanting to do the right thing. Duncan's whole arc was about wanting to protect the kids as a stand-in for his own son. So why would you separate them in the story? Oh, but side note, Rupert Friend as Martin Krebs, he was great. Dude plays a slimy opportunist so well. But I liked that he brought a bit of nuance to the role, and he wasn't an out-and-out coward either. He has moments where he contributes and was actually brave. He was also just a selfish and greedy man too. And so in the end, whilst this movie has its moments, I don't think it lives up to what I wanted it to be. I'm sure it's going to get a continuation because it's tracking well financially, so hopefully they can think of something a bit more interesting next time and flesh out the characters a bit more if they use them again. And so with all that being said, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of Jurassic World Rebirth if you've seen it? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.